just took a major turn as multiple insiders have revealed some new details on a trade that would send Chris Kreider to the Anaheim Ducks. And this trade has just become more convoluted than we originally thought. And this has major implications on not just the current state of the Rangers, but what Chris Drury plans to do the rest of this offseason to build this team for next season. We're going to break it all down in this episode of Rangers Digest. But before we do that, a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. About 74% of you who watch these videos are not subscribed to the channel. So if you want to stay up to date with everything that's happening with the New York Rangers, go down below, hit that free subscribe button, because this is the place to be for all your daily New York Rangers content. But Bret, let's get right into it. I was expecting at this point, as we're making this video now, that Chris Kreider would be an Anaheim Duck, but that's not the case. And we have some new reports and some new details from Pierre LeBrun, piggybacking off of what Frank Saravalli said in our last video. And he said that obviously there is a framework done. They have been talking about it. And we're going to get into another report that Chris Kreider has been well aware of this, by the way, the entire offseason. But Chris Kreider actually has Anaheim on his 15-team no-trade list. So this actually throws a gigantic monkey wrench into everything at this point. So this is what we know. There's another report, and Brett, I'm very curious for your thoughts on this as well. Chris Kreider and Chris Drury and his camp have been talking all offseason. Like I mentioned, this is from Larry Brooks. They've been in constant communication through the offseason. So this shouldn't come as a surprise to Chris Kreider, and everyone is saying that he will waive. He will end up going to the Ducks, but for some reason, this trade has not gone through yet. So how do you feel about these new reports? It seems like at some point this trade is going to go through. There's multiple insiders saying the exact same thing. The framework includes Kreider going to the Ducks, and we're going to get into the prospect that will be coming the other way. We have the name finally, but what's your initial reaction to this today?
Well, Darius, you hit it on the head. Both of us last night, as we were making the video, were preparing. When we got into the live stream today, which is going to be at 5 o'clock Eastern, we thought we would be talking about the deal that was finalized either this morning or early afternoon. And there still is a possibility that that transpires. But as of late, as of this moment, no deal is finalized. I'm still optimistic about it, but like you said, it throws a big monkey wrench into everything because Anaheim is on almost said Chris Drury again, Chris Kreider's no trade list. So it definitely does throw a monkey wrench into things, but I do remain optimistic because we saw a similar scenario play out this past season when it comes to Jacob Trouba, used to be the Rangers captain, and he also had the Anaheim Ducks on his no trade list. And Chris Drury, being as ruthless as he is, we got into this yesterday, and kind of unpredictable. He basically threatened the captain and said he was going to put him on waivers if he didn't waive his no trade clause. So the Rangers were able to execute that deal. So, there is evidence that this has happened before, and there is evidence that it's gotten done despite the hurdles. So I do believe by the end of today, there will be a deal in place. It will be finalized, and hopefully by 5 o'clock Eastern during our live stream, we're talking about a finalized trade, not just a proposed trade.
And if you were watching Sportsnet or were paying attention to Twitter this afternoon, like just a few minutes before we were recording this, just to piggyback off of what you were saying, by all accounts, and from Elliot Friedman himself, he thinks that this trade is going to go through by the end of today. So it could happen while we're live on stream later at 5, like you alluded to, but he does believe that, whatever's holding this up won't be by the end of the day, and that he will be an Anaheim Duck by the end of the day. It seems to me, at least, that the only thing holding this up is the fact that Chris Kreider hasn't waived yet. That is the only thing, it seems like, because we do have a prospect that has been named. And like we discussed in our video yesterday, there was a prospect and a pick coming back the other way. The prospect was unnamed. We were throwing some names out there. But this is from Vince Mercogliano, and he had an article on this morning about the fact that, Kreider hasn't waived yet. Anaheim is on that list, and that the prospect has been named. And it is an interesting one. It's Kerry Terrence from the Anaheim Ducks, and he currently plays in the OHL for the Erie Otters, so he is most definitely a prospect. But this is an interesting one. I wanted your thoughts on this too, Brett, that, in looking at his numbers and the fact that this would be the return for Chris Kreider, I don't think that they're getting a guy like Kerry Terrence to put him in Hartford and let him develop and maybe make the NHL. I feel like they're going to get a guy like this and a draft pick, so then they can either flip both Kerry Terrence and that draft pick or their own draft pick in this year's draft to go out and get either a left shot defenseman or another scoring option, or maybe they package it together for a guy like Jason Robertson, who I do think they're in the mix for. How do you feel about that? Because, this name popping up kind of surprises me. I don't think they're acquiring this player specifically to come in and be a player that they develop.
It definitely surprised me as well. We did go through some names yesterday, a few defensemen, and Kerry Terrence didn't come up in the discussion. But this is a guy, a former second round pick in the 2023 NHL draft, who is from New York. So he's a native New Yorker, and he was a captain for Team USA playing on the junior hockey team. And this is a guy that's currently in the OHL, still developing, hasn't quite cracked through yet, but there are some things to like when it comes to this player. He is a good skater. I've watched some highlights of him using, like I said, he doesn't have elite speed. He's not an elite skater, but he definitely does have the ability to turn it on. He saw a dip in his statistics this past season, but still, he used to be a point per game player. In the OHL, he dipped just below that this past season. He was the captain of the team, which is definitely a good thing to see because whether he's with the Rangers or not, let's just say he ends up sticking around. The Rangers, we've spoken about, they need more toughness, they need more snarl. But in the case of Kerry Terrence, this is a guy that can bring some leadership qualities. You don't get chosen as a captain in this league for no reason. It doesn't happen by mistake, whether you're in the NHL, the AHL, or the OHL. So he definitely does bring some leadership qualities. He's young. He may be an attractive piece for another organization that thinks they could develop him quicker than maybe the Rangers can. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see what the Rangers end up doing here with Terrence. Do they hold on to him? Is this a guy that Mike Sullivan wants to get his hands on? Is this a guy that Sullivan believes he could develop into a solid player for the Rangers? Not a top six player, but a guy that could really be a contributor, a depth piece, a young, energetic piece to this New York Rangers team moving forward, as we see that there's a lot of turnover happening here. This is going to be a team that's really going to start to tap into their younger players, and Kerry Terrence could be a part of that. But if he's not, like you said, Darius, they could certainly move him with that number 12 overall pick. They can move him with another player currently on this roster. So they have options. And like I said yesterday, the most important part of this deal that we hope goes through, obviously, by today, is that the Rangers are going to be getting rid of that $6.5 million salary, and that Anaheim is willing to take on that full contract this year and next year. So it's a win-win for the Rangers. Whether Kerry Terrence turns into a player or not, it doesn't really matter, but it's nice to have that option at least.
Absolutely. And I think you bring up some really good points. Like, there is reason to hang on to a player like this if you do acquire him, right? I think it's going to be interesting because you're freeing up that cap space with this move. So you can go out and get maybe a defenseman. Again, like I mentioned, maybe Jason Robertson is a guy I'm going to keep bringing everything back to because I feel like they are in the mix for him. The Dallas Stars don't want any salary in return. So by making a trade like this and then flipping them a draft pick and a prospect, that could be very enticing for them to then offload that salary, and at least they get something in return. Because like you mentioned, Terrence is a great player. He was on Team USA at the World Juniors. He captained the Erie Otters. Like, there's some great qualities there. Maybe he's not in the elite tier of prospects, but there's some really good qualities, and he'll probably be an NHLer. So I could see it really going either way, because if Jason Robertson falls through, then at least you have this prospect in your system, and you have that salary cap space to go out and do some other stuff in free agency. So it's going to be very interesting. And, we touched on it a lot, and I'm sure we'll touch on it again once the trade finally goes through. But Chris Kreider, an amazing career for the New York Rangers. I feel like he's going to be one of those guys at the end of the day. You brought it up in a video yesterday that'll probably sign like a one-day contract to retire a New York Ranger. But the last thing that I wanted your thoughts on this, and it's pretty interesting from Frank Saravalli today, that, we know the first 2 points here. We know that Kreider's no trade clause isn't expected to hold anything up, which I think is interesting because it is with the trade, unless they're figuring out some other specifics. And it's not a surprise that Kreider knew he was going to get traded. But the third thing is that there are many more big changes coming, and Chris Drury wants to make another big splash. So who do you think it is at this point? Is it Gavrikov in free agency? Is it Jason Robertson? Is it somebody that we don't even know is coming, right? What do you think that Chris Drury is going to do here? Do you think that he has some big, plans in the works? I think he wants to be competitive next year. I think he wants his team back in the playoffs.
I absolutely believe that a big move is coming from Chris Drury, but I don't think it's the move that all Rangers fans expect it to be. I know Gavrikov has been rumored here to the Rangers, and I do think Chris Drury likes him for obvious reasons. He's a good player. But it is an interesting market where Gavrikov is certainly looks better than he actually is because of the state of the market. And Keandre Miller, that's been a talking point for weeks now that Chris Drury has made that known that he wants to move on from Miller. But I really think that the surprise move coming here from Chris Drury, and I could see this developing sooner rather than later. And we've already seen some reports about it late last night, early this morning. And I really believe that Mika Zibanejad is the next man out. I really believe that this was not even the first domino to fall. Like I spoke about yesterday, I feel like Jacob Trouba was the first domino to fall, but Chris Kreider is really like that's the big domino here, and I believe that Mika Zibanejad is going to be on his way out as well. Like I said, Chris Drury, he wants to compete next season, but I believe he wants sustained success. I believe he wants to compete not only for this season, but in seasons beyond. And while Mika Zibanejad, Chris Kreider, they are still productive players, maybe they're better off somewhere else. This is not the recipe for success moving forward for the Rangers. So I do believe Mika Zibanejad is on his way out next.
And I think it's a good point. And we're going to be discussing all of this on our live stream later today. There's so many moving pieces. I mean, I do think that this is JT Miller's team at this point, right? Like, so maybe you do have to move off of, well, we know they're going to move off Chris Kreider one way or another, whether it gets done today or tomorrow, but and maybe Mika Zibanejad as well. So we'll keep tabs on that for sure, and we will be discussing everything in our live stream later, so be sure to tune in for that, and let us know how you feel about all of this in the comments. It seems like things have taken a major turn, and we don't know exactly what's holding up this trade, but it hasn't gotten done yet, which I think is very interesting, but we'll be discussing it at nauseum, I'm sure. Let us know what you think in the comments, and if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with everything New York Rangers.